This is Basketball Infinite. Make sure to like and subscribe and ring that bell for notifications, baby. All right, today we are going to talk about Jabari Parker, who was a young phenom from an early age. This kid was so good that in the 5th grade, he had 5 Division 1 offers. That is absolutely insane. Holy macaroni. And as you see, these are his highlights from the 7th grade, and he was an absolute stud muffin, and he was seen as a can't miss prospect from Chicago early on, and you just knew that watching this kid, that is not a move a 7th grader can make usually. I mean, this is absolutely insane the way he is toying with defenders on the court. And by the time he got to high school, he was an absolute stud muffin because he was the first freshman to start for the Simeon varsity team ever. This is a high school that had Derrick Rose, and in his freshman year, he was an absolute stud muffin. He averaged over 19 points a game. He, again, was the first freshman to start for his team ever, a team that had Derrick Rose, who did not even play on the varsity as a freshman. So that shows you just how much of a stud muffin he was. He was the National High School Freshman of the Year from ESPN, and he had a game that was just can't miss. Fans were coming to the game all around the city. And by the end of his freshman season, he had received numerous scholarship offers from schools like Illinois, Kansas, Florida, Northwestern, and he had significant interest from teams like Kentucky, Duke, and North Carolina. He was playing on Team USA, making athletic plays as just a sophomore, and he helped his team spend much of the year nationally ranked in the top 5 as a sophomore, and by this time, his star was only blossoming. He was developing his skills from the perimeter, he had driving ability, he had athleticism, and he was just absolutely sensational. The Chicago Sun-Times had him as a Class 4A All-State first team player, and he was again the sophomore player of the year nationally from ESPN. So he was pretty much the consensus top undergrad in the country, and his star was only rising by this point. In his junior year, he had a single game scoring record for his high school with 40 points in just 21 minutes of play. Duke, Kansas, Kentucky, UNC, all the big name schools were offering him by this point, and by his senior year, he was a bona fide stud muffin. It wasn't debatable at this point. He had size, he had strength, he had athleticism, he could make windmill dunks, and then he committed to Duke University as one of the top high school players in America, and he was one of the best freshmen in Duke history. As a freshman for Duke, he was a consensus first-team All-American. He was seen as a can't-miss prospect and somebody whose chances of being an NBA bust were pretty slim. NBADraft.net even compared him to Carmelo Anthony. That is not a comparison that is given out lightly. And then we see him entering the big leagues. He was selected with the 2nd overall pick in the 2014 NBA draft, and the future seemed bright as ever. Jabari Parker was now the face of a Milwaukee Bucks franchise looking to make a name for themselves, and he showed flashes his rookie year. When he was healthy, he had the athleticism, he had the scoring ability, and he was overall showing potential. There were rookie bumps just like any other rookie, but overall, averaging over 12 points per game. He had some kinks to work on, but his potential was pretty high. But then, unfortunately, during the Phoenix Suns, on a drive against PJ Tucker, he tore his first ACL for his first major bump in the road. But he returned the next season, and he looked more athletic than before. Modern medicine is an absolute miracle, and he was making dunks left and right. I believe at one point during this season, he was even in the top 10 in the entire league for dunks made, showing that his future was bright. He upped his scoring average to over 14 points a game, and he played in 76 games, showing that he was healthy. He played in the Rising Stars Challenge, where he had this incredible windmill dunk. Holy macaroni, his head was nearly on the rim. And now we get to the peak of Jabari Parker's NBA NBA career, because in the 2016-2017 season, he was breaking out. He was averaging over 20 points a game. He was shooting efficient from the field. He had improved his playmaking ability. And I remember from around the time that a lot of people considered him a pretty consensus top 50, top 60 player in the league. And watching his highlights here, he seems like a complete, well-rounded, gifted NBA player who can make an impact in the league for a long time, and he was starting to finally live up to some of that number 2 pick potential, averaging over 20 points a game, shooting 36.5% from 3, but then he tore his ACL for a second time, which was absolutely devastating. This was on a drive against Tyler Johnson, and this was an absolutely unfortunate set of circumstances. Jabari is helped off the court by his teammates here, and now we have the come down of Jabari Parker's career. He did come back healthy during the 2018 season and played one more season for the Bucks. He was still an offensive threat, and he could still score the ball, but it was at a less efficient rate, and at this point, the weaknesses in his game started to be highlighted. But still, you see these highlights against this game against the Knicks, and he could still score it, but he played in 31 games. He averaged 12.6 points per game. He did shoot a career-high 38.3% from the field, but he only played 25 minutes in the first 2 playoff games for the Bucks in 2018, and he was frustrated about this. And after the season, he signed a deal with his hometown Chicago Bulls for 2 years and $40 million. And the Chicago GM Gar Forman said at the time that he's a 23-year-old player who's a natural fit with their young core. And he did have some impressive games for the Bulls. In this revenge game against the Bucks, he had a multitude of buckets, and he scored in a variety of ways. However, after averaging over 14 points per game, when the Chicago Bulls hired new head coach Jim Boylan, they had a falling out. Basically, Jabari said that him and Jim were super tight when Jim was just an assistant, but once he got elevated to that head coaching role, their relationship turned south, and then Jabari was traded to the Wizards, and here he scored 28 points against his former team in a revenge game, and he still has offensive skills, but overall, his value was declining at this point. I wouldn't consider him a top 100 player at this point anymore. He did average 15 points a game, but at this point, the 2 weaknesses that I think were holding him back were his three-point shooting, which he's shown the ability to be an okay three-point shooter at times, but as you see in 2019, he was shooting at just a 29% clip, and his playmaking skills were pretty below average for the NBA level. He resurfaced with the Hawks in the 2020 season, and here in a revenge game against the Bucks, he scored 33 points, which I would say was his last great effort shown in the NBA, showing that he was still a valuable player in the league. I did like Jabari for the Hawks and thought he was a good fit, but the Hawks weren't very good and they traded him to the Kings, and he did have a nice game in the bubble against LeBron and the Lakers. He had a 19.8 rebound, 6 assist performance, and these highlights you're seeing where he hits a jump shot over LeBron. And then Jabari exercised his $6.5 million option for the 2021 season with the Kings. And here you see him playing one of the games he's played this year. But the thing is, he's played 2 games. And the story of Jabari Parker is just proof that you never really know the circumstances that can happen in the NBA, because for being the number 2 pick and for being the generational talent he was once considered, he's pretty firmly in that bust category now. There's a lot of talk about Andrew Wiggins being a bust, but he's pretty much turned it around, at least for now. But Parker's only played in 2 games, and I have him outside of my top 300 players in the league right now. This was once a guy who was seen as having it all. Versatility, jump shooting, basketball IQ. But injuries and circumstances just happened to ruin the Jabari Parker hype train, and it's one of the more shocking bust stories I've ever seen in this past decade. And it's just really proof that you never know what can happen in the NBA, because seeing Jabari Parker in college, you would have thought he was an absolute stud muffin, and there was an absolutely 0% chance that he would fail in the league. But at this point, he pretty much has. It seems that his game just didn't translate well enough to today's game. And Jabari Parker, I wish you all the best. I hope that the Kings maybe give you a chance, considering how bad they're struggling right now. But it's just one of the craziest stories I've seen in recent basketball history, and it's not really being talked about. But Jabari Parker, you made the NBA. You're an absolute stud muffin, and I wish you all the best.